Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne, and this is episode 105. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe or follow button and check us out at the loudest.com on the planet, KNAC.com. My guest for this episode is podcaster CHRIS CZYNSZAK. He is the founder of the ROCKnPOD EXPO. This year, it's going to be held March 17th through the 19th in Nashville, Tennessee. This event piqued my interest. I won't be able to make it down this year, but I thought it was a unique concept, mixing rock and roll with music podcasting, being a podcaster myself, of course. So let's get to CHRIS CZYNSZAK, the founder of the ROCKnPOD EXPO. All right, man, we're talking about ROCKnPOD weekend coming up on March 17th through the 19th in Nashville, Tennessee. This event celebrates music artists and podcasters, vendors, and fans. If I knew nothing about ROCKnPOD, which I know very little, how would you describe it to me?
Yeah, it's really grown into something cool over the years. It's kind of like a fan convention meets a trade show. That's kind of the easiest way to say it, because if for podcasters and content creators, they can come get a booth and record content all day. We also bring in artists that are, have many of which have things to promote. So music podcasting has kind of taken off as far as being a good promotional arm for a lot of rock artists. And so the shows get content. The artists kind of get to do a one-day press junket and knock out a bunch of promo in one day. And there's also an education track for podcasters where we're going to have some panels and workshops and stuff like that going on. And that brings value. And then if on the fan side, the fans get to come and meet all these celebrity guests that we bring in. There's signing sessions. A lot of the guests have their own table and are very available throughout the day. We have panel discussions, live interviews with the guests, and then of course a series of concerts and events taking place all around the expo through the whole weekend.
So with the podcasting aspect of it, where they're going to be able to, they set up a booth and they're able to interview the artists that are at the convention. Are these podcasts gone out live? Are they recorded? How does that particularly go out?
It used to really just be pre-recorded stuff, because most of the original podcasters that came were just audio shows. And I noticed that was pre-pandemic, and during the pandemic and since, a lot of live shows, live streams, and YouTube shows have kind of popped up. So we've had to get better with connections and stuff during the day, because there's a lot more people going live than there used to be. So, which is a great thing for our venue this year, which is the Nashville Fairgrounds. They have a brand new building with all updated tech. So everybody should have a nice, strong signal to do their thing throughout the day.
How did this event come to be? I saw it started in 2017. How was it formed, the idea behind it?
Yeah, so I started music podcasting back in 2011. So I'm on my 12th year now, and a lot of, you make all these great friendships throughout doing this, because with podcasting, the thing that I love that it differs from radio, where it's a little less competition. It's more, let's all help each other raise our awareness and get our, share with each other's fan bases. So there's a lot of guesting on other shows, and I'd make all these great friendships with somebody like through a Skype call, but I couldn't go out and have a beer with them. So, cause they're 600 miles away or whatever. And then one of my fellow podcasters, BJ Cramp, who's also a published author now, did a Cheap Trick book that's really great. He said, well, we should do some sort of a meetup. And this was back in like 2016 when he kind of had the original idea. And I'm like, well, if we're going to do a meetup, how are we going to pay for it? And he's like, well, we could crowdfund it. I'm like, well, if we crowdfund it and our listeners are paying for us to meet each other, then they should get to come hang out too. And if they're going to come hang out too, then they should be able to do more than stare at a bunch of middle-aged podcasters talk to each other. So then I've had the fortune of getting to interview a lot of the people I grew up listening to, because Nashville's really increased the population with rock artists from over the years. So I started calling in favors, just saying, hey, would you come to something like this? And would you do interviews throughout the day? And would you meet fans and sign stuff in there? And I got way more yeses than no, which really shocked me. And we started very small in 2017 and did it through crowdfunding for a couple of years. And then by the third year, I was like, well, let's try to make the real leap and make this legitimate with registrations, hotel venue and stuff like that. So that was the big leap of faith, but it turned out good enough to keep going, and it's just gotten bigger year over year since then.
Now, you said you've been podcasting for a number of years. Did you start out like I did at a fanzine and just pretty much blogging and stuff like that before you made the transition?
Yep, 100%. I was in local bands here in Nashville in like the early to mid 2000s, and I was starting a family at that time, and I was like, well, I don't want to deal with the the drama that goes on being in a band. So I kind of was like, I got to settle down, raise my kids, but I still wanted to stay connected to rock. So I started writing for a local rock blog here, just covering the local scene because a lot of my friends were in bands there. And then I wind up taking over the site because the guy running it didn't want to do it anymore. And I started doing interviews for that site because I was like, the local scene's great, but Queensryche's coming into town. Let me see if I can get Michael Wilton to do an interview because it'll help. It'll get bigger, obviously more hits on the website. And I was doing that for a while, and I even started writing a book for a while. And the transcription part of it was just killing me. And I was just like, I don't like doing this anymore. And that's when I got a day job and discovered podcasting because I got my first iPod. And then I'm like, oh, I got these interviews that I've recorded. Why don't I just use that and start doing a show? And that's basically how I got the idea.
Now, on the convention day where artists are going to be there, not just performing, they're going to be available for like meet and greets and stuff like that. Is it similar to like a Comic-Con where you pay a fee to get an autograph and a photo and stuff like that?
Yeah, and it varies among the guests because, I let the guests decide how they want to handle that. Some of them do charge and they make out pretty well at it and they sell merch and stuff all day. Then there's others that show up and they just want to do one of the time signing sessions that we have and they don't charge a penny. Like Billy Sheehan and Greg Bissonette last time, they didn't charge a dime for anything. And they were like, we just want to come hang out. And they were a pleasure to work with. But yeah, some artists will charge, but some won't. But it's a very affordable event compared to some bigger conferences.
Yeah, I noticed the ticket prices were very reasonable as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, I want to make sure as many people can check it out as possible. And I mean, I've always admitted that it's great to have these artists that I grew up listening to and come, and it's great the fans get to meet them. But my ulterior motive to this day is getting people in the room who don't know about rock podcasting and getting turned on to it. That's I kind of use the rock stars as bait to get people into music podcasting when they get here.
Now, as far as the podcasters are concerned, are they mainly people that are close to Nashville, or are you getting podcasters from around the country?
Yeah, and it expands every year. The majority of our podcasters are coming in from out of town, from all over North America, and we've had people from Germany in the past. We actually have a guy coming over from the UK this year, which we've never had before. So, yeah, it just that the distance gets a little bigger every year, which blows me away because we do have plenty of local people that show, but the majority of the podcasters that do the platinum package and want to set up shop, they're mostly from out of town.
Are you yourself going to be doing some podcasting from the event, or ROCKnPOD doing a podcasting from this event?
Every year I want to do podcasting, but as the organizer, that's pretty impossible because there's usually a million things going on that I have to kind of tend to. I have an amazing team, which I get to spend more time on hanging out every year. I think all that me and my co-host are going to do this year, we're going to do one of the live interviews on the podcast stage. I think we're going to do one of those. But other than that, I was like, I got enough on my plate. I don't know that I'll be getting much content. One of these years I'll get to come and actually be a podcaster. That would be nice.
What do you think the biggest challenge is with podcasting? I think one of the biggest changes I've seen over the last 20 years for me personally is like when I had a fanzine, everybody went to that one fanzine to get the information that I provided. Now it seems to be divided up between social media sites or podcasting platforms. So you can get the Rock is George podcast. You can watch it consistently on YouTube, but others will only watch it on Spotify. Others will only do Apple Podcasts. It seems all spread out. That's what my personal biggest challenge is. What do you see as challenges?
Yeah, that is definitely there's so many more outlets to get your content, which is great in one way, and also it's hard to track as a creator. But I mean, yeah, that's a big thing, and also there's so many more podcasts now than there used to be. I mean, it was a much smaller pond when I started, and But I mean, my show's still done pretty well. But yeah, I guess it's a little bit of both, but there's plenty of turnover also. There's people that start, they don't get beyond 10 episodes, and then they what they call pod fading. They don't continue doing it. But I tell people, just do your first 10 episodes, and if you're still having fun at that point, keep going. And then if you get to 100, then you're pretty much legit, in my opinion.
Thank you. I'm officially legit because this is like episode 106.
Awesome. Well, congratulations.
I've had some help along the way from knac.com, and I've certainly worked for other sites, and I've been around just like you've been around. But yeah. It's certainly different than it was 15 years ago, but I'm still learning the ropes.
Yeah, and I've followed KNAC for 20 years now. Yeah, I've been a fan of that site for a very long time.
Yeah, one of the first bringing streaming music to the internet, or at least heavy streaming music to the internet. Obviously, today it's a little more difficult with licensing rights and stuff like that. I find that another issue with podcasting is, I'd love to use the music of the guests that I have, but I feel like, in some platforms aren't going to allow me to do that, even if I get permission.
Yeah, that's definitely that's been clamped down on a lot more. It used to be very Wild West, where you could just pretty much get away with anything, but now it's there. Which, I mean, I guess that's a testament to the growth of the platform, the fact that the labels and stuff are paying attention to it. But yeah, and my show had to transition. We used to really break the rules a lot back in the early days, and then as we went along, I'm like, I just want to make sure we're not going to suddenly get thrown off every platform just for what we're doing. So we typically will talk to labels and try to get their permission first, or the artists themselves, or we love doing episodes on independent artists that aren't signed, because there's so much good stuff out there that people miss out on.
What is the name of your podcast specifically?
My show is Decibel Geek.
Okay. The guest list, as far as musicians is concerned, for ROCKnPOD, Eric Martin of Mr. Big, Stevie Rochelle of Tough, Jason McMaster, Dangerous Toys, Eddie Ojeda, Twisted Sister, Ron Keel. I know you said that it's mainly artists that you grew up enjoying. Is that what you can expect from ROCKnPOD always, or are you looking to go beyond the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, I mean, we are looking to expand it a bit more. We do have a little bit, we have some more new artists. We have some independent artists that are coming as guests too. And I do try to expand it a little more each year. Essentially, I grew up a Kiss fan, and one of the big ethos of Kiss is we wanted to put together the band we never saw on stage. So with ROCKnPOD, I kind of say I try to put on the event that I haven't seen that I would want to attend. But yeah, I do always try to diversify it up every year and make it expand the guests to, different areas. It's obvious if it falls under the banner of rock in general, I'm open to it. Like one of our guests this year is Bob Berryhill of the Surfaris, the band that did the song Wipeout. And that's pretty far away from hair metal. But they're celebrating the 60th anniversary of Wipeout this year. So he's going to be coming and talking about that. But yeah, I always try to switch it up a little bit more every year.
And I'm not saying it's bad to have those particular artists, because I feel like the mainstream media has kind of abandoned them to a degree, and that they sort of need podcasters and events like this, because they're still out there making great music, and they're not getting the platform they got 20 years ago.
Yeah, and that was the surprising thing. Like the first year, I mean, it was definitely everyone doing me a favor because they didn't have a clue and I didn't have a clue of what it was going to be. But then by the second year, I had some of our guests thanking me for bringing them over to it. And I'm like, well, I grew up watching you on MTV. And they're like, no, you don't understand. We don't get the coverage we used to on mainstream media. So this is a great outlet to basically let our fans know that we're going to be doing new stuff. So it just sort of it was like a happy accident that it turned into kind of a legitimate promotional thing for a lot of the artists.
And Ron Keel is actually bringing KEELFEST II to the event, where it's pretty much Steeler, Ron Keel, Cold Sweat, everybody kind of under his particular label, RKL maybe.
RFK, yeah.
RFK.
Yeah, it's we're excited to have him and his label involved with. They're also sponsoring part of the weekend too, and I don't know how Ron's voice is going to hold up. That's going to be like 3 hours of singing for him. So I don't know how he's going to pull that off, but probably a lot of vocal rest. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm very excited for that show, and it's only the second time they've done it, and it was an honor to have Nashville picked to be a part of that.
And Ron Keel himself is a podcaster.
Yeah. Oh, Ron's like, I try to tell that I know musicians that are thinking about starting a podcast and doing a Patreon and stuff like that. And I'm like, go look at what Ron Keel is doing. He should be the template you use to do all that stuff, because everything is like high quality, professional, and his interaction with his fans is top notch. I mean, you can't beat the way he pulls all that off.
Do you have like all-star jams as part of the event take place?
Yeah. Well, I mean, KEELFEST will have, I'm sure, several like cameos and people hopping up and doing cool songs. But we're also doing the pre-party concert, which is a thing called Rare Hair that we do here. And my friend Tyson Leslie, who he plays keys for Vixen, he puts these shows together here in Nashville. And Tyson knows literally every musician in the Nashville scene. And it's like a rotating cast of local pro players that switch out as backing band, and then special guests that we have coming in for the expo that are going to get up and do a song or two. So Eric Martin's going to get up and do a song or two. Jason McMaster is, and on and on and on. So that's Friday night. That's on St. Patrick's Day. So that should be a wild one.
With all those 80s guys, you got to be careful of the partying on night one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the convention is going to start with a lot of hangovers, I have a feeling.
Night two is the expo, where the podcasting and the meet and greets and all that other stuff takes place in KEELFEST. And then you get into night three, which is kind of a mix of rock and roll and comedy.
Yeah. So we did this last year at this cool little movie theater. It's like an old school 80s movie theater called Full Moon Cineplex. And like the lobby is decked out with like old 80s horror movie posters and stuff. It's a really cool place. And we did it last year there. We did a screening of Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park with Courtney Cronin-Dole, Don Jameson, and Craig Gass doing comedian commentary. And it was a huge hit. And so we're going to do it again, but we're going to do the home video Kiss Exposed that came out in the mid to late 80s that Kiss put out. So we're going to give that one a shot. And then that night, at a place called the Vinyl Lounge, it's a music venue housed inside of a vinyl record plant that they make vinyl records for artists. And that's going to be punchlines and backlines, which those comedians I previously mentioned. Eric Martin is going to do comedy for the first time, which should be interesting. And then Eric Martin and his bandmates are going to close out the weekend with a big acoustic show, which should be awesome.
Are you still looking for vendors and podcasters or guests, or is everything pretty much done deal right now?
Pretty much everything's locked in. I mean, like the podcast, the high tier podcast thing that you get your table and interviews and all that is sold out, has been sold out for a while. But we do have a couple lower tiered ones where you get into the education track. There's a cocktail mixer the night before, and there's some valuable stuff for podcasters that still want to come. So we have some of the two lower tiered packages for that. And then guests I have a couple more guests that I'll be announcing, but they're all in place for our purposes. And then, yeah, I think and vendors I think are sold out. They're sold out for Saturday. I think we have some available for Sunday. But yeah, that Saturday's pretty for ROCKnPOD itself is pretty much sold out.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Are there any standout memories from past ROCKnPOD events that stick with you?
Yeah, certain ones for personal reasons. Are you familiar with the short film Heavy Metal Parking Lot from the 80s?
Yes.
Okay, so I've been a big fan of that for years. It's only 15 minutes long, and but it became like, it was like viral before the internet. Like people would pass the tapes back and forth. Even Nirvana watched it on their tour bus. So I got in touch with the guy that was the quote unquote director. He was one of the guys interviewing all the people. And I was just like, I love this thing. It would be kind of cool to show the movie at the expo. And this was the first year when I had no idea what I was doing. And we reunited the director and two of the people from the film, two of the very notable people from the film, which was the one guy called Graham, who called himself Graham of Dope. And this guy that was wearing the AC/DC t-shirt singing Living After Midnight on the microphone. We got those two guys to come to Nashville. And we screened the movie, and the crowd that was there loved it, and they had a great time catching up. And sadly they've both passed since we had the first year. So it was nice to meet those guys and make friendships with them. That for me, that was a personal highlight, but also the third year we had Michael Sweet from Striper, who was amazing to work with. David Ellefson was also there, and he was great to work with. But yeah, I mean, it's so many people. But for me, it's the podcasters and the friendships, and our community just gets bigger every year, and it's like a family reunion every year.
Is this a festival that you could see expanding to more than once a year or in more locations?
We are talking about that because Las Vegas is very similar to Nashville, and as far as guests that are located there, and it's a tourist town, and there's a lot to do. So there is talk about trying to do a West Coast version out in Las Vegas. We'll see. We got to get through this year first. I keep telling people, don't ask me about next year till we get through this one first.
Have you come across a lot of red tape in trying to put this event together? I imagine there was a lot more red tape in the first year than there is this year.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a pretty good idea of what needs to be done. It's just stressful with all the different moving parts, and there's fires to put out all the time. But that's just what it is with an event. You just have to sort of roll with it and get through it. But yeah, I mean, my mental state is a little better this year than it was the first couple of years when I didn't know what was going to happen. So I think we can at least anticipate what's going to happen a little better now.
Do you promote other events or just ROCKnPOD?
I did a small little thing with an Iron Maiden tribute band last year, but that was pretty much it. I used to promote local bands and concerts, but it's just one event a year is enough for me. There's so much that goes into that whole weekend that. Yeah, I think I'll stick with the one.
Absolutely. Tickets available through your website. Are they also available at the door?
Yeah, there will be available at the door, but if you want to get your advance tickets, there's early admission for $30 and general admission is only $20. Just go to ROCKnPOD.com, and also the links for the Rare Hair pre-party are there, the KEELFEST show. There's a special combo ticket where you can pay $35 to get into KEELFEST and ROCKnPOD, so you get your ROCKnPOD admission half off if you want to do that. And also the comedy show and the movie screening. All the links are at ROCKnPOD.com.
Excellent. Is there anything else about ROCKnPOD we didn't cover that you want to make sure people know about?
Well, if you're anywhere in the Nashville area or you can make it to Nashville, I think you'll really enjoy it. It's one of those things where a lot of people that never come and they go over for the first time, they have no idea what to expect, but they always walk out smiling and having a great time. So I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't be doing it 6 years later if we didn't believe in it. So I think if you love rock and roll and you love these bands and you want to learn about podcasting, and there's tons of vinyl memorabilia, pop culture, horror, comics, collectibles, all kinds of vendors, there's something for everybody at this thing. And if you're a rock and roll fan, you'll just have a blast.
Sounds like a great time. I can't make it this year, but maybe next year. It's March 17th through 19th in Nashville, Tennessee. The website is NashvilleRocknPodExpo.com.
Yep, or you can just punch in ROCKnPOD.com and it'll take you right there.
Awesome. It was nice talking to you, Chris, and I appreciate you coming on the Rock is George podcast.
Great talking to you, George. I appreciate it.
Once again, I want to thank CHRIS CZYNSZAK of ROCKnPOD EXPO and the Decibel Geek podcast for coming on the Rock is George podcast. If you can make it out to the expo, it's March 17th through the 19th in Nashville, Tennessee. Head over to their website, NashvilleRocknPodExpo.com, or type in ROCKnPOD in your Google search engine. There's still tickets available, and you can get them at the door. Be sure to check out Chris on his Decibel Geek podcast. You can get there by typing in decibelgeek.com. I also want to thank Dave Tedder of Headfirst Entertainment for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. I'll see you again soon.